My daughter's voice was the first thing that cut through the hush of that office, sharp enough to make me flinch. Dad, don't make this difficult. You're not getting a dime, so don't embarrass yourself. She didn't even look at me when she said it. She just leaned in, eyes fixed on the polished desk in front of us, lips barely moving. To anyone walking by that glass wall, we probably looked like a normal father and daughter waiting to see a lawyer, but her words sat between us like a stone. I remember staring at my hands. They were resting on my knees, knuckles pale. A little tremor in the right one I get when I'm tired. The leather chair creaked if I shifted, so I tried not to move. Everything in that room looked expensive and quiet. The kind of quiet money buys. Thick carpet that swallowed footsteps. A clock that ticked like it was apologizing for making noise. Floor-to-ceiling windows with a view of downtown that made the cars and people look like toys. I caught my reflection faintly in the glass. Old guy, late 60s, hair gone mostly white at the temples, wearing the same brown jacket I've had for over a decade. The cuffs are worn shiny. Linda used to laugh and say it made me look consistently dependable. In that office, it just made me look out of place. What? I finally managed. My voice came out softer than I wanted. Melissa, why are you talking like this? Your mother and I, we weren't enemies. She sighed, the way she used to sigh when she was 16 and I asked her to be home by midnight. Dad, please, she murmured. We've already been over this. Mom made everything clear. The company, the properties, the accounts, it's all structured. The family's already agreed on what's fair. The family, I repeated, hearing the word catch in my throat. Am I not part of the family anymore? She finally glanced at me then, just for a second, like she'd forgotten I could still feel. Her lipstick was the same shade Linda used to wear to board meetings. A dark, serious red. You know what I mean, she said. Your situation is different. You and Mom divorced before she built all this. You always said you didn't care about her money. That doesn't mean I deserve nothing, I said, a little sharper than I intended. We were together 20 years. I helped her start that first business. Melissa rolled her eyes. Dad, don't start rewriting history. Mom built the business. You changed oil and did errands. She always said you never understood what she was trying to do. Her words stung more than I wanted to admit. I looked past her at the framed certificates on the wall. Law degrees. Some award with Linda's name on a plaque from years ago. She'd sent me a picture of it once, proud but pretending not to be. Just something they stuck my name on, she'd said. Linda could downplay $100 million like it was a coupon. We'd been divorced a long time, her and I, decades. Somewhere between our 20s and our 50s, we'd gone from sharing a mattress on the floor of a one-bedroom place to separate lives in separate worlds. She built an empire, magazines, real estate, investments. People said she died worth about $150 million. I never asked for a cent. Truth is, I was still trying to wrap my head around the fact that she was gone at all. It had only been a few weeks since the phone call from Melissa. Heart attack. It was fast. Just like that. Melissa tapped her manicured nails on the armrest. Look, after this, Mr. Harrow's going to give us some documents. You'll sign them, I'll sign them, and then we can all move on. You don't want this to drag out. Trust me. Sign what, exactly? I asked. Standard stuff, she said, already bored with the conversation. Acknowledging you don't have any claims, so there aren't delays with probate. It's easier for everyone. Everyone? I repeated again. It seemed like there were a lot of groups I wasn't in these days. The family. Everyone. Before I could say more, the door to the inner office opened and a man stepped out, smoothing his tie. Mr. Collins, Miss Collins, he said with a courteous nod. Thank you for waiting. He was maybe in his 50s. Hair silver at the temples in a way that looked intentional, not like mine. His suit probably cost more than my car. I recognized him from that fundraiser years ago. Same steel blue eyes, same careful smile. Attorney Harrow, Linda's lawyer. We stood up. Melissa moved first, reaching out her hand. Daniel, thank you for seeing us, she said, already in that polished tone she uses on her own clients. My father understands he's not entitled to anything, so we're prepared to make this as simple as possible for you. He shook her hand, then mine. His grip was firm, professional, but his brow creased when she spoke. I prefer to read the document as written, Miss Collins, he said mildly. Speculation isn't helpful. Something in his voice made me straighten in my chair. Melissa's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Of course, she said, the smile back on. I just don't want to waste your time. We followed him into his office. It was even more impressive than the waiting area. Dark wood shelves lined with heavy books. Another wall of glass showing the city stretching out below. I thought about my own place, a small one-bedroom overlooking a parking lot and a row of dumpsters. The rent went up last spring and I'd had to pick up a few extra shifts at the garage, even with my knees complaining. Meanwhile, Linda had penthouses plural. And Melissa. She'd always gravitated upward, like a balloon. Private schools, internships at Linda's companies, nice cars. She'd been orbiting money her whole life, closer to her mother's son than to my Warren in Little Planet. Please, sit, Harrow said. We did. Melissa placed her phone face down beside her, as if even its dark screen might betray her. My palms felt clammy on the smooth leather. Harrow opened a thick folder with Linda's name embossed in gold. The sight of her name in that fancy font made my chest ache. For all our arguing, all our distance, I never imagined I'd outlive her by this much. He cleared his throat. This is the last valid will and testament of Linda Marie Collins, signed and executed June 14th of this year. June, I said quietly. That was after she went into the hospital. Melissa shot me a quick look. Dad, let him finish, she whispered, as if I was a child interrupting story time. But my mind was already turning back to that hospital room. The beep of machines, the smell of disinfectant. Linda's hand cold but still gripping mine. I've been thinking about the past, Jack, she'd said. About what you did for me. I want to make some things right. Then Melissa had bustled in with a paper cup of coffee, and that conversation had floated away like steam. In this document, Harrow continued, Mrs. Collins revokes all prior wills and codicils and directs the distribution of her estate as follows. As he spoke, legal phrases rolled over me like a foreign language. I caught mentions of trusts, foundations, percentages. My own name drifted by in a paragraph about former spouses, and my stomach clenched, waiting for words like no provision, or excluded. Beside me, I could feel Melissa coiling tighter. She knew what was coming. At least, she thought she did. Her lips curled into a small smirk, the kind that had always meant she'd gotten away with something. She leaned toward me without taking her eyes off the lawyer. This is just a formality. Dad, she murmured. Don't be dramatic, all right? We'll sign after and get you set up with a little stipend. You don't need to worry about the rest. A stipend. For a second I saw myself through her eyes, a frail old man with shaky hands, living off whatever allowance she decided to flick my way. I'd spent my life working, paying my own bills, never asking Linda for help, not once. Now my own daughter was talking like she was my guardian. Harrow turned a page. His gaze moved down the lines, then stopped. Something shifted in his expression. Barely, but I caught it. His eyebrows lifted a fraction. And when he looked up again, his eyes went first to me, not Melissa. According to Linda's last valid will and testament, he said slowly, the primary bequest is as follows. The room felt suddenly smaller. Even the city outside seemed to be holding its breath. Melissa sat up straighter, lips parting in anticipation, that smug little half-smile fixed in place. To my former husband, Jack Collins, Harrow began, in recognition of his foundational support and in gratitude for our shared history. The smirk slid right off my daughter's face, like someone had wiped it clean. What he read next wiped away more than her expression. It wiped away everything I thought I knew about what Linda felt, about what Melissa had been telling me, about my place in this family I'd helped build. And in that instant, with Harrow's voice steady and Melissa's eyes suddenly wide, I realized my daughter hadn't just underestimated me. She'd tried to erase me. If you'd met me and Linda back in 1978, you wouldn't have guessed we'd end up in a high-rise lawyer's office arguing over $150 million. You probably would have guessed we'd be lucky to pay the light bill. Back then, we were just two kids in faded jeans, living in a one-bedroom over a laundromat. The wallpaper peeled, the pipes clanged, and the whole place smelled faintly of detergent and fried onions from the diner downstairs. But Linda's eyes were already somewhere 10, 20 years ahead. She'd sit cross-legged on the mattress on the floor, a yellow legal pad in her lap, drawing little boxes and arrows, planning out a future neither of us could afford. "We'll build this together, you and me," she used to say, tapping her pen against my knee. "I couldn't do this without you, Jack." I believed her. I wanted to. I was working at the time as a mechanic, doing 12-hour days at a garage off the highway. I'd come home with my hands black with grace and my shoulders aching, and she'd be there at our wobbly table, reading business books she got from the library. She was smart in a way that didn't show up on school transcripts. Numbers, trends, people. She saw how they all fit together like those puzzles she loved as a kid. The first big step was her idea for a little clothing boutique. Not high fashion, just something nicer than what you could get at the discount store. She said women wanted to feel like they were walking into a place that saw them, not like they were digging through leftovers. I didn't understand all the details, but I understood her face when she talked about it. We didn't have any money. What we had was my tiny retirement account from the garage and a small life insurance policy my father left me. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, papers spread out, pen in my hand. "You're sure?" I asked. "This is everything I've got put away." Linda covered my hand with hers. Back then, her hands were soft, no ring yet, no manicured nails, just little calluses from holding boxes at her part-time job. "It's not everything," she said. "You're forgetting me. We're the real investment. I promise you, Jack, we'll make it back and more." So I signed. We cashed out what little we had and rented a narrow little storefront on a side street. I painted the walls myself on weekends, the smell of fresh paint mixing with the takeout we could barely afford. Linda picked out every hanger, every mirror, every soft light bulb. I built shelves out of plywood and cinder blocks. She stood in the middle of the empty floor and spun, imagining customers where there was only dust. When Melissa was born a year later, the boutique wasn't making much, but it wasn't sinking either. I can still feel the weight of her in my arms that first day. 6 pounds, something ounces, a wrinkled red face, and a full head of dark hair. The nurse laid her in my hands and I thought, "Careful, you'll break her." Then she opened her eyes and looked right at me, and I made a promise without saying it out loud: "You won't struggle like we did." Whatever it takes. Linda and I used to stand over her crib at night and whisper plans. "She'll go to college," Linda said. "A real college, not community. She'll have choices. She won't know what it's like to count pennies for groceries." I added. We meant it. For a while we were on the same team. I picked up extra shifts. I did the books at the kitchen table after Melissa went to sleep, squinting at invoices while Linda sorted inventory. On the days the babysitter canceled, I strapped Melissa to my chest and swept the boutique floor while Linda charmed customers. The cracks didn't show up all at once. They arrived as little things. A night where Linda stayed late for a business dinner with a supplier. A Sunday where she disappeared to meet investors and came home smelling of wine and someone else's cologne. New people appeared, slick young consultants with expensive watches and empty eyes. They stood in our little store and talked about scaling and branding like they'd invented the words. I'd come home tired, clothes streaked with oil, and find Linda at the table with them, sketching out ideas I barely understood. When I asked questions, she'd pat my shoulder distractedly. "Don't worry about it, Jack," she'd say. "You're good with your hands, let me be good with the numbers." I stayed in the background. Somebody had to make sure the rent got paid and Melissa had someone to read her stories. I'd tuck her in at night, her hair smelling like baby shampoo, and she'd grab my finger with her tiny hand. "Mom says you don't care about money," she told me once, maybe 6 years old, her words thick with sleep. "Is that true, Dad?" I hesitated. "I care about you and your mom being okay," I said. "Money's just a tool to help with that. It's not the whole world." She nodded like she understood. Maybe she did. Maybe she heard something different. By the time Melissa was 10, the single boutique had turned into 3. There were boxes of inventory, spreadsheets, meetings. Linda was always on the phone. The more successful the business became, the less I seemed to fit in. "You've never understood my world," she said during one of our late-night fights, her face flushed, a half-empty glass of wine on the counter. "And I'm done apologizing for growing." "I'm not asking you to apologize," I said. I'm asking you not to forget who was there at the beginning. That's exactly what I mean. She snapped. You think because you lent me a little money and nailed some shelves to the wall you built this? I did. You're holding me back, Jack. The divorce wasn't one big explosion. It was more like a slow leak. We saw a mediator, signed papers. On the surface, it was civil. In truth, we were both bleeding. On paper, I could have fought for more. Half the business at that point, maybe. But when I looked across the table and saw how fierce she was, how desperate to protect what she'd built, I made a choice. Just give me enough to get set up somewhere. I told the lawyer. She needs the capital to keep things running. It's for Melissa anyway. So I took a modest settlement. A small payout, my old truck, some furniture. No equity in the expanding company. No slice of the future. I moved into a little rental house on the other side of town, patched the roof myself, found work at a different garage. Linda kept the business and the momentum. On paper, we shared custody. In practice, Melissa drifted toward the nicer house, the better school district, the vacations I couldn't provide. I got Wednesday dinners and every other weekend, a rhythm that slowed as she grew older. At Linda's place, there were granite countertops and catered parties. At mine, there was lasagna from a box and second-hand furniture. Kids notice that kind of thing, even if they don't say it out loud. By high school, Melissa had started parroting some of Linda's lines. Mom really built everything from nothing on her own. She told me once, sitting at my small kitchen table, idly picking at the vinyl peeling up at the corners. She said it like it was a compliment. It landed like a stone. I remember a different version. I said quietly, rinsing dishes in my chipped sink. She shrugged. Well, that's what she says. I never asked Linda for anything. Not even when I saw her face in magazines, self-made mogul, underneath her picture. I clipped one of those articles and stuck it to my fridge with a magnet. Not because of the money, but because I remembered the girl on the mattress with the legal pad who'd said, "We'll build this together." As the years went on, Melissa's visits became less about us and more about what I could do for her. Co-sign a car loan. Watch the kids while she went on a business trip. Fix a leaky faucet at her townhouse. I said yes more often than I should have, telling myself that's what dads do. Every now and then, though, Linda and I crossed paths. One Thanksgiving, Melissa invited me at the last minute. When I got there, her dining room looked like something out of a catalog. Perfectly folded napkins, candles, food enough for 20. There weren't enough chairs, so someone dragged in a spare from the breakfast nook, and I ended up at the corner of the table, squeezed in near the kids. Halfway through the meal, I escaped to the kitchen to refill my water. Linda was in there alone, carving the rest of the turkey. Still don't like asking for anything, do you? She said without turning around. I blinked. What do you mean? You're half dying of thirst out there, and you wait until nobody's looking to get yourself a drink, she said. Then she did turn, handing me a glass. There were lines around her eyes now, but her gaze was as sharp as ever. You've always been like that. Old habits, I said. She hesitated, like she was going to say something more. Then the grandkids barreled in, and the moment passed. I noticed that year that she sat down slower than she used to, that she rubbed her chest twice when she thought nobody was looking. Later, I heard from a mutual friend she'd been having minor heart issues. Nothing serious, they said. These days, nothing serious can kill you. Over the next few years, I heard about procedures, medications. Melissa started using phrases like managing mom's care and primary decision maker. She sounded proud, important. It made sense on the surface. She lived closest. She knew the doctors. She handled Linda's growing stack of paperwork. I told myself it was good that our daughter was stepping up. Maybe this was our chance, I thought. A crisis like that can pull people together. Old grudges could fade. We could be in the same room and not feel like we were on opposite sides of a courtroom. Through it all, I kept my distance from Linda's finances. The more zeros I heard attached to her name, the more determined I was not to become one of those stories about ex-husbands and gold diggers. I paid my own way, kept my head down, fixed cars, watched my grandkids when asked, and tried not to think about stock portfolios and vacation homes. I never called to ask for help when the water heater blew or when I had to choose between dental work and new tires. Pride, maybe. Or just habit. Maybe that's why. In the end, when her heart finally started to fail for real, she did something none of us expected. When Linda's health really began to slip, I thought our family might finally pull together. Instead, it gave my daughter the chance to rewrite the story. The first time I saw Linda in the hospital, I almost walked past her room. Hospitals all smell the same: antiseptic and boiled vegetables, something metallic under the air freshener. I'd been on enough emergency visits with friends over the years that my feet knew the rhythm of those linoleum floors. Still, that day, I felt like a trespasser. At the nurse's station, I cleared my throat. "Excuse me. I'm looking for Linda Collins. She was brought in yesterday." The young nurse scrolled on her computer, not really looking at me. "Relationship." I hesitated. Ex-husband sounded small, ugly, like I'd been thrown out of her life and had no business circling back. But friend wasn't right either. "Family," I said finally. Before the nurse could respond, I heard heels clicking on the tile. Kind of. Melissa's voice came from behind me. She stepped into view, dressed in a tailored blazer that didn't have a wrinkle on it. Even in that harsh fluorescent light, she looked put together, not a hair out of place. Her eyes, though, were tight at the corners. "This is my father," she told the nurse. "He can go in, but keep it short. Mom's tired." The nurse glanced between us, then nodded. "Room 4112. 10 minutes, okay. She needs rest." As I followed Melissa down the hall, I noticed she didn't slow her pace for me. When she was little, she used to match her steps to mine, swinging our hands between us. Now she was half astride, a headphone buzzing in her fist. "How is she?" I asked. Melissa shrugged. "Stable, they say. It's her heart. They're running tests." "Did she ask for me?" "I don't know why I ask. Old habits." She gave me a sideways look. "She didn't tell me not to call you?" she said. "Don't make it weird, Dad." Linda's room was dim, blinds half drawn. Machines hummed softly by the bed. Little green lines waving steadily on a screen. She looked smaller, somehow swallowed up by the white sheets, gray streaks in her hair more pronounced without makeup. When I stepped in, her eyes opened. For a second, they were cloudy, unfocused. Then they sharpened. "Jack," she breathed, and a thin smile tugged at her mouth. "You still have that old jacket." I glanced down and laughed despite myself. "It's warm," I said. "And it still fits. Can't say that about much else." She reached out, and I took her hand. It was cool, but her grip was stronger than I expected. "We were kids back then," she murmured. "On that mattress over the laundromat, remember? I wouldn't have had anything without you." The words landed softly, but they echoed loud in my chest. We'd danced around that truth for years, each pretending the other didn't need to hear it. Hearing it now, in a room that smelled like bleach and fear, meant more than I could say. Before I could answer, Melissa cleared her throat. "Mom, don't get worked up," she said. She moved closer to the bed, checking the monitor like she understood what the lines meant. "The doctor said you need to stay calm." "I'm talking, not running a marathon," Linda muttered, but she squeezed my hand once more, then let go. Melissa's phone buzzed again. She pulled it out, glanced at the screen. "I have to take this," she said. "To Linda, the lawyer's coming tomorrow, remember? We need to finalize everything while you're still up for it." "Always something to finalize." Linda sighed. Melissa leaned down, kissed her forehead, and slipped out into the hall, already speaking into the phone. Left alone with Linda, I sat in the plastic chair by her bed. "You look tired," I said. "You look old," she countered, and we both chuckled. Then her face sobered. "I've been thinking a lot about the past, Jack. About the way things went." "That's what hospitals do," I said. "Give you too much time to think." She stared at the ceiling. "I was hard on you. I didn't always give you the credit you deserved. For all of it." Something thick lodged in my throat. "We did what we thought was right," I said. "You did what you thought you had to. That doesn't mean I was fair," she replied quietly. Before I could say anything else, her door edged open and Melissa's head appeared. "Mom, you need to rest," she said. "Don't start digging up old drama. The cardiologist will be here soon." Linda's mouth tightened. "It's not drama, it's my life." "Exactly," Melissa said. "And we're trying to keep it going. Dad, why don't you go grab some coffee? I'll sit with her for a bit." There it was again, that gentle shoving, dressed up as concern. I stood anyway. Old habits. I'll be back, I told Linda. In the hallway, the smell of burnt coffee hit me before I reached the vending machine. As I fumbled for change, I heard Melissa's voice echoing softly from around the corner. "No, we'll use the latest draft," she was saying. "He won't contest anything. He never has. That's the good thing about him." I froze. A pause. Then her tone dropped even lower. "No, she's too tired to go through all the old documents. I'll handle it. The lawyer's coming tomorrow." The paper cup crumpled a little in my hand. I stepped closer, just enough to see her back turned, shoulders squared, phone pressed to her ear. When I shifted my weight, my shoe squeaked against the floor. Her head snapped around. Our eyes met. "Gotta go," she said quickly into the phone, hanging up without a goodbye. "Did you get your coffee, Dad?" "Yeah," I lied. "Machine's broken." She studied me, trying to read whether I'd heard anything. I kept my face as blank as I could. Back in the room. She slipped into a chair on the other side of the bed, screen lighting up her face as she scrolled. "Mom already updated her will," she remarked casually, not looking up. "You don't have to worry about any paperwork, Dad. I'm handling it." "I never said I was worried," I replied slowly. She smiled tight. "Exactly. So let's keep it that way." A few days later, she showed up at my apartment with a manila envelope. "Just some routine stuff," she said, pushing it across my kitchen table. "APA forms, medical consent. It helps to have everything coordinated in case something happens. I'm already taking care of Mom's arrangements. It just makes sense to line up yours too." "My arrangements?" I asked. She laughed like I'd made a joke. "Don't be dramatic. It's just so if you end up in a hospital, I can get information, talk to doctors, handle insurance. It's boring, trust me." She flipped to a page, tapped where I should sign. The print was small, dense. My eyes aren't what they used to be. I squinted, picked up the pen. I'd been signing school permission slips and loan papers for her since she was little. My hand moved almost on its own. Later that night, lying in bed, I realized I couldn't remember exactly what that paper had said. Something about access. Something about decisions. A little unease crawled up my spine, but I pushed it down. "She's your daughter," I told myself. "She's just trying to help." On my next visit to the hospital, Melissa stepped out to take a call, leaving me alone with Linda again. The room was quieter this time. Her skin looked thinner, blue veins tracing delicate paths along her hands. "I had the lawyer come," she whispered, eyes fixed on the window. "I changed a few things." My heart thudded. "What kinds of things?" "I wanted to make something right," she said. Her gaze slid over to me. There was a shine in her eyes that wasn't just the medicine. "Especially for you." It took me a second to find my voice. "Linda, what did you—" The door opened. Melissa walked in briskly, tucking her phone into her pocket. "Okay, Mom, that's enough talking," she said. "You're supposed to be resting, not planning your estate with visitors." Linda's mouth thinned. "I can talk to my ex-husband if I want to. And then your blood pressure spikes and the nurses yell at me," Melissa countered. "Come on. Close your eyes for a bit." I caught Linda's gaze. There was something there. A message half delivered, a rope thrown but not yet grasped. Then she sighed and let her eyelids fall. 3 days later, the phone rang at 6 in the morning. "No one calls with good news at that hour. She's gone," Melissa said when I answered. No hello. No preamble. Just those 2 words flat. She had another episode in the night. They tried, but my knees gave a little. I sat down on the edge of the bed. "I'm sorry," I managed. "The service will be small," she went on. "Just close friends and family. We'll handle it. I'll let you know when and where. We. Not you and I, we. Meaning whoever else she counted as inner circle now." The funeral was held at a sleek chapel attached to one of those event centers you only see from the freeway. The seats filled up with Linda's business associates. Men in suits, women with sharp haircuts, all murmuring about her legacy. I ended up a few rows from the back. Melissa was up front, black dress impeccable, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue at all the right moments. She played the grieving daughter well. After the service, as people milled around with tiny cups of coffee, an older woman I recognized from the early boutique days shuffled up to me. Her name was Marjorie. She'd been one of Linda's first employees. "She talked about you, you know?" Marjorie said, patting my arm. Said she'd finally done right by you in that will. At least I fixed that part, is what she told me. I'm glad she had the chance. The words warmed me for a moment, a little ember in all that cold ceremony. Maybe that was what Linda had been trying to tell me in the hospital. Maybe, after all these years, she'd left a small corner of her empire to the man who'd painted those first walls. That hope lasted 3 days. Then my phone rang again. "Melissa, Dad," she said, voice clipped. "I just wanted to let you know you don't need to worry about any estate matters. Mom left clear instructions. I'm handling everything with the lawyers." I swallowed. "Did she leave anything I need to know about?" I asked carefully. "She mentioned changing some things." There was a tiny pause on the line. "She left you her blessing," Melissa said finally. "Dad, you're not in the will. Don't start expecting a payout." Mom wasn't sentimental about money. I stared at the wall in front of me, at the old photograph of a much younger Linda laughing on a milk crate in that first store. My chest ached in a way that had nothing to do with age. "Of course," I said, because it was the only thing that would come out. "I understand." After we hung up, I sat there a long time, turning Marjorie's words over in my mind. She said she'd finally done right by you. Linda's whisper in the hospital. "I changed a few things, especially for you." I'd spent my life not asking, not pushing, trusting that if something was meant for me, it would find its way. For a few days I tried to accept that maybe I'd misunderstood. That maybe her idea of doing right was different than mine. But those half-finished sentences, those overheard phone calls, the paper I'd signed without reading, they didn't let me rest. For once in my life, I started to wonder if taking my daughter's word for everything might be the biggest mistake I'd ever made. Melissa showed up at my apartment 3 days after the funeral, carrying a leather tote and an expression that was almost gentle. It put me on edge more than if she'd come in shouting. "You really need to fix that step," she said as she came up the stairs. "It's a lawsuit waiting to happen." I'd been meaning to hammer that loose board back down. I opened the door and stepped aside. "I'll get to it," I said. "Come on in." She wrinkled her nose at the faint smell of last night's frying oil. "My place isn't dirty, just small and lived in. Second-hand couch, old TV, photos yellowing a bit in their frames." She sat at the table without waiting to be asked, sliding a neat stack of papers out of her bag. "We need to make sure you're taking care of Dad, now that Mom's gone," she began. Those words, "taken care of," hit my ears wrong, like she was talking to a dog or a patient, not her father. "I've been taking care of myself a long time," I said, easing into the chair opposite her. "I know," she said quickly in a tone that meant she didn't believe it mattered. "But things are more complicated now. Estate taxes, probate, all of that. I met with Daniel, and we came up with something that'll protect you." She spread the papers out, fanning them as if she were dealing cards. Lines and lines of small print marched across the pages. My name appeared here and there, and Linda's, and a handful of words I recognized: trust, claims, indemnify, floating in a sea of legalese. "This is just a simple agreement," Melissa said, tapping one page with a manicured nail. "It acknowledges you have no claims against Mom's estate. And in exchange, there'll be a monthly stipend for you from a family trust I'll manage. That way you don't have to worry about bills, and we don't get bogged down in court drama." "No claims," I repeated slowly. "It's standard," she said. "You remember Mom said you didn't want anything, right? You've always said that. You don't care about the money." I heard my own past words coming back at me like a boomerang. I'd said that so many times over the years it had become a reflex. "I don't care about the money. I care about you. About peace." But now, with Linda gone and that number, 150 million, hanging over everything, those old declarations felt like a trap I'd built for myself. "I don't want to fight," I said. "That's true." "Exactly," Melissa said, smiling like we'd just solved something together. "At your age, you don't want legal stress. These things can drag on. You could end up getting audited or pulled into depositions. Estate taxes are complicated. You could get in trouble without even realizing it." I blinked. "Why would I get in trouble?" "Because you don't know this stuff," she replied, shrugging. "That's not an insult, it's just reality. Dad, these legal terms are above your head. Just trust me like Mom did, okay? Trust her like Mom did. That line snagged on something inside me. I heard Linda's whisper in the hospital. I changed a few things. I wanted to make something right, especially for you. I heard Marjorie at the funeral. She said she'd finally done right by you in that will. My thumb traced a sentence halfway down the page. Release of any future claims, it said in bold. What does this part mean? I asked. Melissa leaned over, too quickly. It's just saying you agree not to sue the estate later. It keeps everything clean. Otherwise, the court could freeze distributions to me and the grandkids until every potential claimant is cleared. This way, you're officially on record as not contesting anything. I wasn't planning to contest anything, I said. But why do I have to sign something to prove it? Her smile thinned. Because that's how it works, Dad. Paper trails. Documentation. Welcome to the 21st century. I sat back, the chair creaking. My eyes moved over the dense paragraphs. The letters blurred a little. I rubbed at one temple. My head had been foggy since the funeral, sleep broken into pieces each night. Can I have some time to read this? I asked. Maybe have someone look it over with me. Just to be sure I understand. For a heartbeat, something sharp flashed across her face. Then her expression hardened. This is exactly why Mom didn't want to leave you anything, she snapped. The room went very still. You make everything difficult, she went on, her voice rising. You were never there for her success, Dad. You don't understand the business, the legal side. And now, suddenly, you want to act like you deserve a cut. I felt heat creep up my neck. I never said I deserved. You think a few years of helping at the beginning means you get to swoop in now and drag us through court. She cut in. I'm the one who's been running around to doctors, handling her affairs, taking care of the grandkids. Where were you when we were juggling her medications and her board meetings? At my job, I said quietly. Paying my rent. As usual. She snorted. Exactly. Nothing's changed. The words landed like slaps. Still underneath the hurt, something else stirred. Anger, not the hot, roaring kind I'd seen in other men, but a slow, steady burn. I'm not accusing you of anything, Melissa, I said, keeping my voice soft. I just want to see for myself what I'm signing. That's all. She glared at me for a few seconds, then stood abruptly, sweeping the papers back into a stack. Forget it, she said. If you don't trust me, we'll do it the hard way. But don't come crying to me when the IRS is knocking on your door. She shoved the documents into her bag, slung it over her shoulder, and marched to the door. Melissa, I called. She paused, hand on the knob. I never said I didn't trust you, I said. I said I wanted to understand. That's different. She didn't turn around. Same thing. She muttered, and then she was gone, the door shutting a little harder than necessary behind her. The apartment felt even smaller after she left. I stood there for a minute, listening to the faint echo of her footsteps on the stairs. Then I sat back down and stared at the empty spot on the table where the papers had been. An hour later, my phone rang. Her name lit up the screen. I'm sorry, I snapped. She said when I answered, her tone smoother, rehearsed. It's just been a lot dealing with Mom's death and all this paperwork. I overreacted. It's all right, I said automatically. But you understand, she continued. The will doesn't mention you. I promise. Daniel went over everything with me. This was just my way of making sure you were taken care of anyway. Most ex-husbands don't get that. There it was again. The story, told so confidently I almost believed it. Almost. That night, after she hung up, I sat at the table with the old phone book open in front of me. It took 3 tries to find the number for Harrow & Associates. When the receptionist answered, her voice was crisp, efficient. Harrow & Associates, how may I direct your call? Yes. Ma'am, I said. My name is Jack Collins. My ex-wife, Linda Collins, was a client of Mr. Harrow's. I just wondered if I could ask a question about her will. Are you represented by counsel, Mr. Collins? She asked. No. Ma'am, I said. There was a pause, keys tapping in the background. At this time, she said, we're reviewing matters with the executor of the estate. If you are a party to the will, you will be contacted as part of the standard notification process. Executor, I repeated. Who is that? M's Melissa Collins, she replied. Is there anything else I can help you with today? Executor. Another new title for my daughter. One that came with power I didn't fully understand. My mouth felt dry. No, I said slowly. That's all. Thank you. When I hung up, my heart was beating too fast. If I was a party, they'd contact me. According to Melissa, I was not. According to Marjorie and Linda's half-finished sentences, maybe I was. Those two versions of reality scraped against each other in my mind like metal. Later, when Melissa called and found out I'd phoned the lawyer, the mask slid further. Why would you go behind my back like that? She demanded. You're just going to confuse them. It's already hard enough managing this estate without you meddling. I wasn't meddling, I said. I just wanted to hear it from the source. I am the source, she snapped. I'm the executor. If you can't trust me on something this simple, maybe you shouldn't expect me to help you when you really need it. After we hung up, the apartment closed in around me. I pulled out an old shoebox from the closet, photos from the early days. Linda with paint on her cheek, holding a hammer. Me standing in the empty storefront, grinning like a fool. Melissa as a toddler in the boutique window, hands pressed against the glass. Was I rewriting history, like Linda had accused me once? Had I imagined the weight of my contributions? Had I misheard Linda in that hospital room? Maybe. Doing right just meant updating her foundation donations. Maybe I was being ungrateful, greedy, reading too much into throwaway comments. Am I paranoid? I asked the quiet room. A knock at the door broke the silence. It was my neighbor, Tom, from down the hall, carrying back the drill he'd borrowed. You look like you've seen a ghost, he said, setting the drill on the counter. Just tired, I replied. Then, before I could stop myself, the whole mess started spilling out. The hospital visits, the overheard phone call, the funeral, the papers Melissa wanted me to sign, the receptionist mentioning the executor. Tom listened, arms folded, brow furrowed deeper with each detail. Let me get this straight, he said when I finished. Your ex-wife's lawyer's office says they'll contact you if you're in the will. Your daughter says you are definitely not in the will, and yet she needs you to sign something saying you have no claims. I nodded slowly. He shook his head. Since when do they need you to sign something to confirm you're not in a will? He said. If you're not named, you're not named. End of story. Something's off, Jack. I don't know, I murmured. Maybe it's just procedures, taxes. She says it's complicated. Complicated my ass, he said. Look, it's your family, I get it. But if it were me, I'd go talk to that lawyer in person. Not a receptionist. Not your daughter. The man himself. Just to be sure. After he left, I sat back down, the apartment suddenly feeling like the starting point of something instead of the end. My whole life, I'd taken people at their word. Linda's, when she said she needed every penny to grow the business. Melissa's, when she said I didn't care about money. It had always been easier to avoid conflict than to ask hard questions. But now, with one signature, I could be erasing rights I didn't even know I had. Or I could be confirming that my suspicions were just a tired old man's pride. Either way, I realized I couldn't keep floating in this fog. If my daughter was right, I told myself I'd walk away with a clear conscience. But if she was lying, I needed to know before I signed away anything. The next morning, I put on my old jacket, combed my hair as neatly as these hands could manage, and checked the bus schedule to downtown. For once in my life, I decided not to warn Melissa what I was about to do. The next morning, downtown looked different to me. I'd driven past those glass towers for years on my way to the garage, thinking they belonged to another species of human. People with briefcases, not lunch pails. As I stepped off the bus and craned my neck up at the building with Harrow and Associates on the lobby directory, I felt like I was walking into enemy territory. Inside, the air was cool and smelled faintly of lemon polish. A young woman sat at the reception desk, fingers flying over a keyboard. She looked up as I approached, taking in my scuffed shoes, my old jacket, the hat I squeezed in my hands. "Can I help you?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am," I said. "My name is Jack Collins. I was married to Linda Collins. I called last week. I was hoping to speak with Mr. Harrow, if he has a moment." Oh, recognition flickered. Her posture straightened, her smile tightening a fraction. "I remember your call. Mr. Harrow is very busy with estate matters right now. Do you have an appointment?" No, I admitted. But it won't take long. I'd just like to ask him one question. I can wait. She hesitated, then picked up the phone. I heard her murmur my name, then Linda's. After a moment, she nodded, covering the receiver. He can give you a few minutes, she said. Please, have a seat. I'll let him know you're here. I sat on the edge of a leather sofa, hat in my lap, feeling like I might sweat right through my shirt. Framed photos lined the wall. Harrow shaking hands with judges, Linda at some gala smiling, champagne glass in hand. In one, I was almost sure that was my shoulder at the far edge of the frame. Half included, half erased. The story of my life. Mr. Collins, a voice said. I stood up so fast my knee popped. Daniel Harrow stood in the doorway, suit immaculate, reading glasses in his hand. Thank you for seeing me, I said. Of course, he replied. Come on back. His office was the same one I'd sat in on the day of the will reading, but it felt different now without Melissa there, radiating certainty. Harrow closed the door behind us and gestured to a chair. I'll get right to it, I said as I sat. I know you're busy. My daughter Melissa told me I'm not in Linda's will at all, that I have no claim. But some things Linda said before she died, and something one of her friends told me at the funeral. It doesn't quite line up. I'd like to hear it from you. Either way. He studied me for a moment, fingers steepled. I remember you, he said finally. From before the divorce, and from some events over the years. Linda mentioned you often. I wasn't sure what to do with that, so I just nodded. Mr. Collins. He went on. As you probably know, attorneys are bound by confidentiality. Our duty is to the client. In this case, to Linda's expressed wishes in her will. However, beneficiaries named in a will have a right to certain information about the provisions that affect them. He opened a drawer in his desk, withdrew a key, and used it to unlock a small cabinet built into the credenza behind him. From it, he pulled out a blue folder with Linda's name embossed on the tab. My heart started to pound. I want to be very clear, he said, setting the folder carefully on the desk. This is the last valid will and testament of Linda Collins, executed in June of this year. There have been attempts to introduce documents dated later, but we'll come back to that. He put on his glasses and flipped through the pages, until he found what he was looking for. When he began to read, his voice slowed, as if he understood just how much weight each word carried. To my former husband, Jack Collins, he read, in recognition of his foundational support and in gratitude for our shared history, I leave the majority of my estate, including but not limited to my interest in Collins Lifestyle Group and associated holdings, to be distributed according to his discretion, subject to applicable law. He looked up at me over the rim of his glasses. The majority of my estate, he repeated. For a second, I thought I'd misheard him. The word majority didn't fit in my ears. It was too big, too sharp.
I swallowed.
She really wrote that. For me. She did? He said. Roughly 65% of her net estate, by our current estimates. The remainder is allocated to various charitable foundations and to a series of trusts for MEMS, Melissa Collins and your grandchildren. My mouth had gone dry. 150 million. 65%. Numbers like that belonged in newspapers, not in sentences about me. What about Melissa? I managed. How does that work? He flipped a page. Your daughter is the income beneficiary of a trust. She receives a generous stipend, indexed to inflation, with provisions for additional distributions for education expenses, medical emergencies, or the grandchildren's needs. However, the principle of that trust is restricted. She does not receive a lump sum inheritance. So she gets something, I said, trying to make sense of it. But not all. Correct, he said. Linda was very deliberate. She wanted Melissa and the grandchildren provided for, but she also wanted to ensure that the bulk of what she'd built was entrusted to someone she believed would be prudent, and, in her words, less swayed by appearances. I let out a sound that might have been a laugh if it hadn't caught in my chest. Linda, after everything, had looked past the suits and the speeches and remembered the man with the paintbrush and the loan forms. She'd remembered me. A swell of emotion rose, grief, gratitude, something like vindication. For 20 years after the divorce, I'd told myself the story the papers told Linda the genius, Linda the self-made woman, Linda who did it all, on her own. I'd shrunk my part down to something almost invisible, just to keep the peace. Hearing her words now felt like someone had turned up the lights on a dim room. Then, like a shadow crossing that light, came the memory of Melissa at my kitchen table, sliding papers toward me. "You're not in the will. Sign here. You don't understand these things. Trust me like Mom did." My stomach turned. "Mr. Harrow," I said quietly, "my daughter told me, more than once, that I wasn't in the will at all. That Linda left me nothing." His jaw tightened a fraction. "I can't speak to your private conversations," he said carefully. "I can tell you that Melissa has been in this office multiple times since her mother's death. She has characterized you as unconcerned with the estate. She suggested you were confused and had no expectation of inheriting anything." "Confused," I repeated. "Like I wouldn't notice the difference between 0 and 65%. She also inquired," he went on, "about the possibility of simplifying the estate. She asked about offering settlements to potential claimants in exchange for their waiving any rights under the will. She even floated the idea of contesting the June will on the basis of Linda's competency at the time it was signed." Competency. My chair creaked as I sat back. Linda was sharper in that hospital bed than half the people I know. She knew exactly what she was saying. "I agree," he said. "We conducted thorough capacity assessments before executing that will. I have detailed notes from that meeting. She was fully informed and very clear about her intentions." He hesitated, then added, "There were also some documents presented to us. Purported later updates. That did not, in my professional opinion, reflect Linda's wishes or handwriting. We declined to accept them as valid." For a moment, the room felt like it was tilting. I gripped the arms of the chair, knuckles white. "So my daughter," I said slowly, "has been trying to what? Override Linda's will. Cut me out completely. I can't ascribe motives," he said gently. "But the effect of what she proposed would have been to minimize or eliminate your interest in the estate." "Yes. It would also have materially increased her own control over the assets." The slow burn I'd felt for weeks flared into something hotter. I thought of Linda's face in that hospital room. The way she'd said, "I wanted to make something right, especially for you." I thought of Marjorie at the funeral, her frail hand on my arms. "She said she'd finally done right by you." And then I thought of Melissa, her voice cool over the phone. "You're not in the will. Mom wasn't sentimental about money. My own daughter," I said, more to myself than to him, "was arranging to erase me while I was still picking out a shirt for the funeral." Harrow watched me quietly for a moment, then took off his glasses, folding them carefully. "Mr. Collins," he said, "I've been practicing in this area a long time. Unfortunately, what you're describing is not uncommon. Significant estates bring out strong reactions. Linda anticipated some tension, which is one reason she structured things as she did. She trusted you to honor her wishes." I rubbed a hand over my face. "I don't want a war," I said. "I never have. But I can't pretend I didn't hear what you just read." "And you shouldn't," he replied. "What I can do as Linda's attorney is ensure that her will is administered as written. As a named primary beneficiary, you will receive formal notification. I will also be sending letters to all interested parties, summarizing the key provisions to avoid any misunderstandings." "Letters," I repeated. "So she can't just bury this." "Precisely," he said. "However, Melissa is still the named executor. That gives her a degree of procedural control. I would strongly recommend that you retain independent counsel, someone who represents only your interests. I can refer you to an excellent colleague who specializes in elder law and estate disputes. She's very familiar with cases involving potential undue influence." The phrase, "undue influence," made my skin prickle. I nodded slowly. "I never thought I'd need a lawyer for anything beyond a parking ticket," I said. "But I guess there's a first time for everything. For what it's worth," he said, his tone softening, "your ex-wife was very clear. She knew exactly what she was doing. She wanted, in her words, to correct the record about who helped her get where she did." Something in me unclenched at that. Whatever came next, at least that part of the story was finally written down in ink instead of regret. We stood. He handed me his colleague's business card, then walked me to the door. "As I said," he reminded me, You will be receiving formal notice by mail. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to have your attorney contact me directly. Thank you, I said, for reading it to me. For not just sending me away. He gave a small nod. Linda chose you, Mr. Collins. The law will respect that. The hallway outside felt brighter than when I'd walked in. My legs carried me toward the elevator on autopilot. I stepped inside, pressed the button for the lobby, and leaned back against the mirrored wall, staring at my own stunned face. As the door slid open on the ground floor, my phone buzzed in my pocket. Melissa's name lit the screen. I stared at it for a second, then answered. Why did you go see Mom's lawyer without telling me? She hissed, skipping any greeting. There was a brittle edge to her voice I hadn't heard before. What did you say to him? You're going to ruin everything. So, she knew. I stepped out into the lobby, the marble floor cold under my soles, and for the first time in a long, long time, I didn't rush to calm her down. This time, I wasn't going to back down. I didn't sleep much after that call from Melissa. Her words, "You're going to ruin everything," echoed in my head, mixing with Linda's voice from the hospital and Harrow's steady reading of the will. By dawn, I felt wrung out and strangely clear. If Linda had trusted me with the majority of what she built, then standing by while our daughter rewrote her wishes wasn't humility anymore. It was cowardice. The elder law attorney Harrow recommended had an office across town, in a modest brick building wedged between a dentist and a tax place. No marble, no glass walls. That helped. I felt less like I was walking into a lion's den and more like I was stepping into a clinic. Her name was Rachel Monroe. Early 40s maybe. Dark hair pulled back, glasses, a suit that looked practical instead of flashy. She stood when I came in and shook my hand firmly, like I was someone worth taking seriously. "Mr. Collins?" she said. "Come on in. Daniel sent over a brief summary, but I'd like to hear everything in your own words." Everything. That turned out to be a lot. We sat at our small conference table, and I went through it all. The hospital visits, Linda's half apology, Melissa's talk about the lawyer, the overheard hallway call, the funeral, Marjorie's comment, the phone call where Melissa told me I wasn't in the will. Then the envelope of papers at my kitchen table. The no claims. Language, the way she'd snapped when I asked for time. Rachel listened without interrupting, a yellow legal pad in front of her, pen moving occasionally but not frantically. Every so often, she'd ask a precise question. "Do you recall the date of that conversation? Did she say the word will specifically, or just papers? Have you signed anything other than the hospital form she brought earlier?" When I finished, I felt like I'd run a race. She looked down at her notes for a moment, then back up at me. "Okay," she said. "First of all, I'm sorry you're going through this. Losing an ex-spouse you still care about is complicated enough, without your own child turning the estate into a battlefield." "It doesn't feel like a battlefield," I said quietly. "It feels like I'm tied to a chair watching her dig a hole with my name on the headstone." A corner of her mouth lifted. "That's one way to put it." She tapped her pen on the pad. "Legally, there are several red flags here. You have a daughter in a position of power, executor, caretaker, who's attempting to get you to sign away rights she claims you don't even have. She's misrepresenting the terms of the will. She's implied you're confused. Taken together, we're looking at potential undue influence, attempted fraud, and possibly financial elder abuse, depending on the jurisdiction's definitions." Elder abuse. The phrase made my stomach knot. I'd seen those stories on the news about strangers scamming old folks. I never imagined it would be my own daughter in that role. I still have one of the papers she brought," I said, reaching into the folder I'd brought along. I grabbed it from the trash after she left, just in case. I slid the crumpled document across the table. She smoothed it out, eyes scanning quickly, then more slowly, her jaw set. "This isn't a HIPAA form," she said. "It's a release and waiver. It says in plain English, well, plain for lawyers, that in exchange for an unspecified monthly support payment, you permanently relinquish any and all present or future claims to Linda Collins's estate, including any interest you may have as a beneficiary under any will or trust." "So if I'd signed that," I said, "even though the will leaves me what it leaves me, I'd be giving that up." "Correct," she said. and you'd be putting yourself at the mercy of whatever support your daughter decided to provide, which legally might be very little. She met my eyes. This is not something a person asks another to sign if they're just tidying up paperwork. This is something they ask when they know you have rights, and they're trying to make those rights disappear. A cold anger settled over me. It felt different from the hot flare I'd felt before. This was heavier, more solid. Melissa knew. This wasn't ignorance or confusion. She'd seen the will, seen my name, and gone straight to figuring out how to erase it. What do I do? I asked. Rachel took a breath. First, we stabilize the situation. Daniel has already agreed to issue formal notices of the will's main provisions to all interested parties, including Melissa. That creates a paper trail that can't be quietly buried. I'll coordinate with him on that. She numbered points on her pad as she spoke. Second, I will send your daughter a letter, on my letterhead, stating that you will not be signing any releases or waivers regarding the estate, that you are fully aware of your status under the will, and that all future communications about estate matters should go through me. I will also request a full accounting of any actions she has taken as executor so far. Account closures, transfers, anything. I swallowed. She's not going to like that. She doesn't have to like it, Rachel said. She has to comply with the law. Third, she continued, I want you to start writing things down. Every interaction you've had with her since Linda got sick. Dates, times, what was said, who else was present. Memory fades and details matter in court. Court, I echoed. The word still scared me. It may not come to that, she said. But we prepare as if it will. She tapped the crumpled waiver document. Do you have any texts or voicemails from her? Anything where she says you're not in the will, or implies you're forgetful, or tells you not to talk to the lawyer? I thought for a moment. She's texted me things like, don't complicate this, Dad, and trust me, you're not in the will. Yes, and voicemails too. I don't delete much. Half the time I don't know how. Good, she said. Don't delete anything. Going forward, I'd also like you to document any threats, pressure, or attempts to question your sanity or memory. In these cases, there's often a pattern of undermining the elder's confidence to make them easier to manipulate. I stared at the table. She's still my daughter, I said quietly. I keep seeing her as a little girl, holding my hand in the grocery store, asking for candy. The idea of her in handcuffs, I don't want that. Rachel's voice softened. I understand. And to be clear, hiring me does not automatically mean criminal charges. That's a separate path the state might choose based on evidence. Right now, what you're doing is defending yourself and enforcing your late ex-wife's will. She leaned forward slightly. Your ex-wife entrusted you with her life's work, Mr. Collins. Are you willing to let your daughter erase that because you're afraid of making waves? The question settled in my chest like a stone. Was I willing? I thought of Linda's face when she'd said, I wanted to make something right. Of all the times I'd stepped aside, taken less, stayed quiet. Maybe that had been mercy then. Now it would be betrayal. No, I said, surprising myself with how sure I sounded. I'm not. Good, she said. One more thing. Once Daniel's notices go out and my letter lands on Melissa's desk, she's likely to escalate. She may call you, text you, show up in person, angry, maybe even panicked. She might say you're confused, that people are taking advantage of you, that you never wanted this. I nodded. That sounds like her. We're legal, she continued. I'd like you to record those conversations. Check your state's consent laws. We'll go over them. But in many places, as long as one party to the conversation knows it's being recorded, it's admissible. Those recordings can be invaluable. They show tone, pressure, intent. I wouldn't even know where to start with that, I admitted. I barely know how to check my voicemail. Do you have any family members you trust? She asked. Someone a bit more tech-savvy. A grandchild, maybe. A nephew. My mind went to Ethan, my son from my second marriage. He lived 2 states over but called regularly, always asking about my back, my truck, my week. We didn't talk about money. Maybe that was why it was easy. I have a son, I said. He's good with computers. And one of Melissa's kids, Lily. She's always fixing things on my phone when she visits. Pick one you're certain wouldn't run back to Melissa with everything, Rachel said. Ask them for help setting up call recording, secure backups for your documents and messages, maybe even a way to discreetly record in-person meetings. We're not spying for fun here, we're protecting you. On the bus ride home, I called Ethan. Hearing his voice was like stepping into a room with the windows open. Hey, Dad, he said. Everything okay? Not exactly, I said. You got a minute? I told him a slimmed-down version, enough to explain the will, Melissa's behavior, the lawyer's plan. He was quiet for a long stretch. When he finally spoke, his words came out tight. She seriously tried to get you to sign away everything, he said. After what Mom did for her. That's wow. She's under a lot of stress, I said automatically, the old instinct to defend her kicking in. Stress doesn't make you a thief, he replied. Tell you what, next time I'm in town, I'll set you up with some apps. In the meantime, we can FaceTime and I'll walk you through some basics. Grandpa, I'll help you. She can't just push you around like that. We spent an hour that evening with him patiently explaining how to back up my messages to the cloud, how to save voicemails, how to start a recording during a call. I wrote everything down in big letters on a notepad. After we hung up, I sat alone in my little kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator suddenly a comforting sound. I thought about how we'd gotten here. Years of me smoothing things over, telling Melissa yes when no might have been better, stepping back so she and Linda could shine. I'd taught her, without meaning to, that I'd always fold, that my needs, my rights, were negotiable. Maybe this mess wasn't just her making. Maybe I'd helped write the script. That week, Rachel filed her letters. Harrow sent out formal notices of the will's main provisions. Somewhere in her larger, nicer kitchen, Melissa opened an envelope and saw the words, "Majority of my estate," attached to my name in black and white. 2 days later, my phone buzzed with a text from her. We need to talk. In person. I forwarded the message to Rachel. She called back almost immediately. Meet her, she said. But on your terms. Public place midday. Keep your phone recording. And don't go alone if you feel at all unsafe or overwhelmed. Bring a friend, have someone at another table. Think of it as witness, not backup. I looked around my apartment, the same walls, the same faded photos. But the air felt different now. Less like a cage, more like a staging area. All right, I said. I'll set it up. As I scrolled through my contacts, my finger stopped on Melissa's name. I hesitated for just a second, then moved on to Lily's. Grandpa, she chirped when she answered. What's up? Hey, sweetheart, I said. I've got a bit of a tech problem I could use your help with. If my daughter wanted a face-to-face, she'd get one. But this time, I wasn't coming as the weak old man she thought I was. The next time Melissa tried to lie to my face, there would be a record of it. I picked a little diner on the edge of downtown, the kind of place with cracked red booths and a bell over the door that jingled when you walked in. It was public enough to feel safe, but not so busy that you couldn't hear yourself think. Or record. I got there half an hour early. The waitress, a woman about my age with tired eyes and a kind smile, brought me coffee without asking. Waiting on someone? She asked. My daughter, I said. We've got some things to straighten out. She gave me a sympathetic look and moved on. 2 booths behind me, by the window, Lily slid into her seat with a soda and her phone. She'd insisted on coming when I told her what was going on. I'll just be here, Grandpa, she'd said. Like, background noise. You don't even have to look at me. But if something happens, you won't be alone. Now. She caught my eye and gave the smallest nod. I patted my phone in my pocket, feeling the reassuring weight of the recorder app already open, 1 tap away from starting. 10 minutes past the time we'd agreed on. The bell over the door chimed. Melissa walked in, coat draped over her arm, heels clicking on the worn linoleum. Even in that shabby diner, she looked like she'd stepped out of a boardroom. Her hair was perfect, makeup subtle but precise. The only thing out of order was the tightness around her mouth. She didn't greet me. She just slid into the booth opposite me, setting her designer bag on the bench like a shield. You blindsided me with that lawyer, she said by way of hello. After everything I've done for you. I tapped my phone screen under the table, feeling the slight buzz that meant the recording had started. I asked him a question, I said calmly. I wanted to know what your mother's will actually said. I told you what it said, she snapped. But no, you had to go behind my back and make me look like an idiot. Melissa, I said quietly, read me the will. The June one. The one your mother signed when she was still sharp as a tack. It leaves the majority of her estate to me. People talk about moments when time slows down. I saw it then, the flicker in her eyes, the way her pupils shrank, the way her fingers tightened around the water glass the waitress had just set down. Mom was confused. She said, recovering quickly, "You know how she got near the end. You probably brainwashed her into some guilt trip about the early years. That's not what she really wanted." "I didn't brainwash anyone," I replied. I held her hand while she remembered. "That's all." She gave a bitter laugh. "Oh, please. You changed a few tires and nailed some shelves to a wall and suddenly you think you built a whole empire. Mom built that company. Mom went to the meetings, took the risks. You were just there." The words stung, but they didn't knock me over the way they might have a month earlier. I took a breath. "I mortgaged my future to get that first store open," I said. "I worked nights doing the books, mornings at the garage, afternoons raising you while Mom met investors. I'm not saying she didn't do the heavy lifting later. She did. She was brilliant. But I was there at the foundation. She remembered that, even if you don't." Melissa rolled her eyes. "You're making this bigger than it is," she said. "That release I brought you. It was just standard paperwork. We do it all the time. Streamlines probate, avoids delays. You sign, you get your stipend, we move on. It said I waive any present or future claims to Linda Collins's estate." I reminded her. "That's a little more than standard paperwork." She waved a hand. "Legal language. You wouldn't understand. That's why you're supposed to trust me." I leaned forward slightly. "Then answer me something," I said. "Why did you tell me, more than once, that I wasn't mentioned in the will at all?" She opened her mouth, then closed it. For a second, the mask slipped. "Because that's how it should have been," she said, before catching herself. "I mean, that's how Mom originally planned it, before you guilted her into changing it." "So you knew," I said softly. "You knew exactly what the will said, and you chose to tell me the opposite." She straightened, eyes flashing. "It's $150 million, Dad," she hissed. "Did you really think you, living in that tiny apartment, would know what to do with it? You don't understand investments, taxation, any of it. I was going to give you an allowance anyway. You didn't need to know the details." "An allowance," I repeated. The word tasted like rust. "Yes," she said. "Monthly support. Enough to keep you comfortable. I'm not a monster. But the idea that you'd be in charge. Honestly, Mom owed me. I'm the one who took care of her in the end, not you. I managed her meds, her appointments, her board meetings. Where were you? Changing oil." I felt Lily's gaze on the back of my neck, hot and horrified. I kept my own eyes on Melissa. "Your mother made her choice," I said. "I didn't ask for it. I didn't even know about it until Harrow read it to me. I'm just honoring what she wrote." "If you loved me," Melissa shot back, "you'd sign everything over and let me handle it. You'd take the stipend and stay out of it. That's what a real parent would do. Step aside for their child." I shook my head. "If I loved you, and I do, I wouldn't help you start your life by stealing from your own mother's grave." Her cheeks flushed red. "Stealing," she practically shouted. Heads began to turn in our direction. "You think I'm stealing? This is my inheritance, Dad. Mine. You were supposed to fade into the background like you always have. Take the scraps, be grateful, and disappear. That's the role you chose years ago." The bell over the door jingled as someone left, glancing at us on the way out. The waitress hovered a moment, then backed away. "If you drag this out," Melissa continued, lowering her voice but not her intensity, "I will contest Mom's will. I'll say you manipulated her when she was weak. I'll tell the court you've been forgetful, that you don't understand what you're signing. They'll check your mental state. Do you want that? Do you want to be dragged in for competency exams like some senile old man?" There it was, the threat, plain and sharp. For a second, fear fluttered in my chest. Not of exams. I knew my mind was still intact. But of how easily she could spin a story where I was the villain or the victim instead of the man who just asked to see the truth. I took a slow breath. I won't be signing anything you put in front of me without my own lawyer, I said. Your mother's will stand as written. You being executor doesn't give you the right to rewrite her wishes. It gives you the responsibility to carry them out. Listen to you, she sneered. Did your little lawyer friend coach you on all those big words? She reminded me. I said, that respect doesn't stop at the grave. And that includes respecting Linda's choices. Something in Melissa snapped then. She slapped her palm on the table, rattling the sugar packets. This is elder abuse of me, too. You know, she burst out. Do you have any idea how hard this has been? Everyone expecting me to fix everything while you sit in your little apartment and play the victim. Melissa, I said gently. You're shouting. Maybe I should shout, she shot back. Maybe I should tell everyone here that my senile father is trying to steal a company he had nothing to do with. That he's being manipulated by lawyers who just want a cut. Does that make you feel big, Dad? Suing your own daughter. Murmurs rippled around the diner. I could feel eyes on us from every direction. Somehow, I stayed seated, hands folded on the table. I haven't sued anyone, I said. I asked a question. I listened to an answer. That's all. She stared at me, breathing hard. Then she grabbed her bag and slid out of the booth so fast her hip bumped the table, sloshing my coffee. You'll regret this, she hissed, leaning down close. I swear to God, you will regret ever walking into that office. She straightened chin high and stalked out. The bell over the door gave a frantic jangle in her wake. For a moment I just sat there, the sudden silence buzzing in my ears. Then I felt a presence at my elbow. Grandpa, Lily said softly. Her face was pale, eyes wide. We got everything, every word. She held up her phone, recording app still running. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. Later that afternoon, I sat in Rachel's office again, my phone set between us on the table. We listened to the recording together. My own voice sounded odd to me, calm, almost detached. Melissa's, by contrast, was sharp, frantic, every word edged with entitlement and fear. We heard her admit she knew the will's terms, heard her call the waiver standard paperwork while acknowledging its effect, heard her talk about my inheritance, about me fading into the background, about the allowance she'd give me, heard the threats about contesting the will, attacking my competence. When the audio ended, Rachel exhaled slowly. Well, she said, if I ever need a case study for my law students, this one's it. This is textbook undue influence and attempted financial exploitation. She picked up her pen. Here's what we're going to do, she said. I'll file a motion with the probate court requesting oversight of Melissa's actions as executor. We'll submit this recording as part of our evidence. Based on this and the other documentation, I'll also petition to have her removed as executor and replaced with a neutral third party, an independent fiduciary or professional administrator. She glanced at me. The judge may also refer the matter to the district attorney for investigation. That's their call. But we will at least ensure that Linda's estate is administered according to her wishes, not your daughter's ambitions. I stared at the phone, at the little waveform frozen on the screen. Once we file this, Rachel went on, it's going to get ugly. Melissa will fight. She may drag other family members into it. She may say things about you in open court that hurt to hear, even if they aren't true. Are you ready for that? I thought of Melissa's face in the diner, twisted with anger, saying I was supposed to disappear. I thought of Linda's face in the hospital, tired but resolute, saying she wanted to make things right. One of them had written her wishes in ink. The other was trying to erase them in pencil. I closed my eyes for a moment, then opened them. I was about to find out, I said slowly, just how ugly my own daughter could be. I met Rachel's gaze and nodded. File it, I said. Let's see this through. The next time Melissa and I faced each other, it wouldn't be over cold coffee in a diner. It would be in a courtroom. Probate court wasn't like the courts you see on television. There were no grand oak doors or packed galleries, just a modest room with beige walls, scuffed benches, and a judge whose black robe looked a little too big for the chair he sat in. Still, when I walked in and saw Melissa at the other table with her lawyer, my heart pounded hard enough to make me lightheaded. Rachel touched my elbow lightly. Breathe, she murmured. We're just telling the truth today. Linda's old friend Marjorie was there, sitting in the second row, clutching her purse to her chest. A few other people I didn't know scattered along the benches. Maybe clerks. Maybe curious attorneys with nothing better to do. It felt absurd that the outcome of Linda's life's work was being decided in a room that looked like it could double as a traffic court. Melissa didn't look at me at first. She was busy whispering to her attorney, a sharp-faced man in a navy suit. When she finally did glance over, her eyes were cold, mouth set in a hard line. There was no trace of the girl who used to wave at me from the school stage. "All rise," the bailiff intoned as the judge entered. We stood. I gripped the edge of the table until my knuckles ached. After the formalities, the judge, a woman with steel gray hair and tired eyes, peered over her glasses at the files in front of her. "We're here on the estate of Linda Collins," she said. "We have motions regarding the conduct of the executor, Ms. Melissa Collins, and a petition by the beneficiary, Mr. Jack Collins, for removal of the executor and appointment of a neutral administrator. Counsel, appearances for the record." Names were stated, alliances drawn. Then it began. Melissa's attorney went first. He stood, buttoned his jacket, and launched into a polished speech. "Your Honor," he said, "this is at its heart a tragic family misunderstanding. My client has been the primary caretaker, both medically and financially, for her late mother for years. In her grief and in the rush to handle complex estate matters, there may have been some confusion, some miscommunications. But there was never malicious intent." He gestured toward me briefly, an almost dismissive flick. "Mr. Collins, the Destin's ex-husband, is 70 years old. He has, at times, expressed disinterest in the financial side of Ms. Collins's enterprises. When confronted with the reality of her final testamentary choices, he may have become confused, perhaps influenced by others. The document at issue," he picked up a copy of that waiver, "was a well-intentioned, if premature, attempt to organize distributions and avoid unnecessary tax complications. To characterize it as exploitation is, frankly, a distortion." Rachel rose smoothly when it was her turn. "Your Honor," she began, "what we have is not confusion. We have a pattern. A daughter in a position of trust and authority, executor, caretaker, repeatedly misrepresenting the terms of the will to her father, pressuring him to sign away rights he did not even know he had, and doing so while characterizing him to others as confused and uninterested." She laid out the timeline: Linda's June will, Melissa's immediate visits to Harrow, the attempts to introduce suspicious updates, the waiver she'd tried to slip under my pen, her threats in the diner. Each event, when spoken aloud in that neutral, measured tone, sounded worse than it had in the messy swirl of my head. "And," Rachel concluded, "we have more than Mr. Collins's recollection. We have Ms. Collins's own words." She picked up my phone, now in a small plastic evidence bag, and handed it to the court clerk, along with a transcript. "Subject to the court's permission, we'd like to play a short recording from a meeting between Ms. Collins and Mr. Collins. Recorded lawfully with one party's consent." Melissa's attorney shot to his feet. "Objection, Your Honor. This recording invades my client's privacy and was taken out of context." The judge held up a hand. "Counsel, sit. I'll hear it and determine its relevance." The clerk plugged in the device. The room filled with the tinny sound of clinking dishes and distant diner chatter. Then my own voice came through the speakers, calmer than I remembered. "Why did you tell me that I wasn't in the will at all?" Melissa's reply followed, clear and sharp. "Because that's how it should have been. I mean, that's how Mom originally planned it." We sat there, all of us, listening to my daughter's voice hang in the air, unblinking. "It's $150 million, Dad." The recording continued. "Did you really think you, living in that tiny apartment, would know what to do with it? I was going to give you an allowance anyway!" "You didn't need to know the details. Honestly, Mom owed me. I'm the one who took care of her in the end, not you. You were supposed to fade into the background like you always have." I saw the judge's expression tighten at that. Marjorie brought a trembling hand to her mouth. The recording went on, catching Melissa's threats about contesting the will, about claiming I was senile, about competency exams. Each sentence was a stone dropping into the still water of the courtroom. When it ended, the silence felt heavy. Melissa's attorney cleared his throat. "Your Honor," he said, As I mentioned, this was an emotionally charged conversation, taken in a moment of grief and frustration. My client's words do not reflect her true intentions. They reflect something. The judge cut in dryly. She turned to Melissa. "Ms. Collins," she said, "please take the stand." Melissa walked to the witness chair like a sleepwalker, jaw clenched. She was sworn in, then settled, hands clasped too tightly in her lap. Rachel approached, file in hand. "Ms. Collins," she began, "when did you first learn the specific terms of your mother's June will, particularly the provision leaving the majority of the estate to your father?" Melissa looked at her attorney, then back at Rachel. "At the meeting with Mr. Harrow after Mom's death," she said. "He explained it then." "So you knew," Rachel said, "when you told your father that he was not in the will at all?" She shifted. I misspoke. I meant that he wasn't a primary beneficiary, not in the way I or the charities were." "It was." Rachel picked up the transcript. "Your exact words, in a phone call, were, 'Way, Dad, you're not in the will. Don't start expecting a payout.' Do you recall saying that?" Melissa's gaze darted to the judge, then back. "I was under a lot of stress," she said. "Mom had just died. I was trying to protect him from unrealistic expectations. He's always said he doesn't care about money." A murmur rippled through the gallery. The judge tapped her pen once on the bench. "And this document," Rachel continued, lifting the waiver, "the one asking him to relinquish any and all present or future claims to the estate in exchange for a stipend you would control. What was your intent in presenting it without suggesting he obtain independent legal advice?" "I thought it would make things easier," Melissa said. "Taxes, distributions. He gets support, I handle the details. He doesn't like dealing with paperwork. I've always done that stuff for him." "Did you ever tell him?" Rachel pressed. "That signing this would effectively negate his rights under the existing will. That he'd be giving up the majority of the estate your mother had specifically left to him." Melissa's jaw worked. "He wouldn't have wanted that responsibility," she said. "He's not good with that kind of thing. I was protecting him by lying to him about the will." Rachel asked, eyebrows raised. "My intent was to honor what Mom really would have wanted if she'd been thinking clearly." Melissa snapped. "She told me for years she wanted me to have control. She was confused when she signed that will. He guilted her into it." I flinched. The judge leaned forward. "Ms. Collins," she said, voice cool, "do you have any medical evidence or testimony from the drafting attorney to support the claim that your mother lacked capacity when she executed that will?" Melissa faltered. "No, but—" "Because we have the drafting attorney's notes," the judge continued, tapping the file in front of her, "which indicate she was fully aware of her decisions and quite intentional about correcting what she perceived as past inequities toward Mr. Collins." Melissa's gaze dropped to the tabletop. Rachel stepped back. "No further questions at this time, Your Honor." Melissa's own attorney tried to rehabilitate her, asking about her caregiving, her long hours, her grief. She teared up, talked about medications and late-night phone calls and board crises. "And I didn't doubt she'd done a lot. She had been there when I wasn't. That's what made all this hurt so much. Truth and manipulation, twisted together. But every time he tried to circle back to confusion, to paint the waiver as a loving gesture, the recording hung over us." Her own words, played back without inflection, didn't match the picture he was trying to draw. Eventually, the judge held up a hand. "I've heard enough," she said. Everyone stilled. "Ms. Collins," the judge began, "executor is not a synonym for owner. Your duty was to the decedent's instructions, not your personal preferences. The evidence shows that you deliberately misrepresented the terms of the will to a primary beneficiary, attempted to have him sign away rights without independent counsel, and considered introducing questionable documents purporting to override your mother's clearly expressed wishes." She turned a page, eyes flicking down. "Accordingly," she continued, "this court finds that you have a significant conflict of interest and have endangered the proper administration of the estate. You are hereby removed as executor of the estate of Linda Collins. An independent professional fiduciary will be appointed in your place." A soft gasp escaped Marjorie. My own chest felt tight, like I'd been holding my breath for weeks and only now dared let a little out. In addition, The judge said, "You are ordered to provide a full accounting of any actions you have taken with regard to estate assets since your mother's death. Bank account movements, property transfers, all of it. Failure to do so will result in sanctions." She paused, then looked directly at Melissa. "Let me be clear," she said. "This court takes very seriously any attempt to exploit an elder or undermine a decedent's testamentary plan. I will be referring this matter to the appropriate authorities for review. Whether it results in criminal charges for financial elder abuse or related offenses is not my decision, but it is now in their hands." Melissa's face crumpled. "You're really going to do this to your own daughter?" she burst out, turning to me instead of the judge. "Over money." The bailiff took a half step forward, but the judge held up a hand. "Ems. Collins," she said sharply. "You will address the court, not your father, and you will compose yourself." But Melissa's words had already hit their target. Not because they were true, but because I'd always feared that's how it would look from the outside. Old man picks money over family. I swallowed hard. Across the room, Marjorie's eyes shone with tears. She gave me the smallest nod. The judge banged her gavel once, marking the end of the hearing. Papers shuffled, chairs scraped. It was over, at least this part. In the hallway outside, the fluorescent lights buzzed faintly. People streamed past us, some avoiding eye contact, some pretending they hadn't just heard every dirty detail of our family laid bare. I was halfway to the elevator when I heard the quick, uneven click of heels behind me. "Dad," Melissa called. I turned. She stood a few feet away, mascara smudged, hands shaking. "We can still work this out," she said, voice wobbling. "We don't have to do this. You can tell them you don't want to press anything, that you're fine with me handling things. We can come up with our own arrangement." I looked at her, really looked at her. The woman in front of me was my daughter, yes. She was also the same person who'd sat in a diner and talked about giving me an allowance like I was a pet. Both truths existed at once. "Rachel says some of it is out of my hands now," I said quietly. "The judge is referring things for review." She scowled. "Of course she is. Lawyers love dragging things out. They get paid more that way. Don't you see they're using you? You're nothing without Mom's money, Dad. You never have been." The words were meant to cut. And they did, but not the way she thought. "I loved your mother long before there was any money," I said. "On a mattress over a laundromat, sharing noodles from a pot. That's something you never understood." She laughed a harsh, broken sound. "You picked money over your own blood," she spat.
"No," I replied.
"I chose to respect your mother. Something you should have done too." She stared at me a moment longer, eyes blazing. Then she spun on her heel and stalked down the hallway, shoulders rigid. Back in Rachel's office later, she went over the practical fallout. "The independent executor will take over immediately," she said. "They'll handle distributions according to the will. We'll monitor, of course, but they answer to the court now, not to Melissa." "And her?" I asked. "There will likely be a civil component," Rachel said. "Sanctions for any misuse of estate funds we uncover. Possibly a suit for damages if there was significant harm done. As for criminal charges, that's up to the prosecutor's office. They may reach out to you for a statement. You'll have a say in how far you want to push." I thought of handcuffs, of orange jumpsuits, of visiting rooms separated by glass. I thought of Lily, hearing whispers at school about her mother being a thief. "I don't want to destroy her life," I said. "She did wrong. She needs to face that. But I don't need to see her behind bars to feel like Linda was heard." Rachel nodded. "We can make that clear if and when they ask. You can tell the truth without lobbying for a specific punishment, and we'll make sure there are safeguards. No authority for her over your finances, no more papers she can slip under your nose." I left her office with a stack of forms, a list of next steps, and a headache that settled deep behind my eyes. A few weeks later, I got the formal notice I'd been waiting for. The court had accepted the will as valid. The independent executor had begun the process of marshaling assets, valuing properties, planning distributions. On paper, the majority of Linda's estate would indeed come to me. I went home to my small apartment and sat in my old armchair, the evening light slanting through the blinds. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere down the hall, a baby cried, then quieted. I had one So why did it feel so much like I'd lost my daughter forever? The estate battle was over, but the real cost of what had happened, to trust, to the idea of family, was only beginning to sink in. The estate didn't change overnight. Real life rarely moves as fast as court orders. It took months for the independent executor to sort through the maze Linda had left behind. Business holdings, properties, investment accounts I'd never even heard of. Every so often I'd get a thick envelope in the mail with charts and explanations written in language so dense I had to read each page twice. But the important part was simple for the first time. Those envelopes came addressed to me. One afternoon, the executor, an older woman named Janet with tired eyes and a non-nonsense voice, sat with me at my new kitchen table. Not the wobbly one from the apartment. This one was solid oak in a modest little house on a quiet street. It wasn't a mansion. I didn't want one. It was just enough. 2 bedrooms, a small yard, a porch where I could sit and watch the world go by without hearing my upstairs neighbor's television through the ceiling. "We've finished the initial transfers," Janet said, sliding a folder toward me. "Your primary accounts are set up. I strongly recommend working with a financial planner, someone independent of the family, to map out a long-term plan." I chuckled dryly. Long-term at my age. She smiled faintly. "Longer than you think, if you're careful. You may not spend all of this in your lifetime. That's another thing to plan for." I thought about that. About money outlasting the person who'd earned it, then outlasting the person she'd left it to. It felt unreal. The planner she recommended was a soft-spoken man who wore cardigans instead of suits. He didn't talk down to me. He spread my options out on the table like pieces of a puzzle. "First things first," he said. "Your comfort and security. We'll make sure your bills, medical needs, and a little travel are covered for as long as you're likely to need them. After that, we can talk about what legacy you'd like to leave." The word, legacy, used to feel like it belonged to Linda. Now, for the first time, someone was connecting it to me. We set up a plan, a conservative income stream for me, enough that I could quit the garage gracefully instead of hobbling out one day on a bad knee. A cushion for emergencies that didn't involve choosing between tires and teeth. Then we talked about the grandkids. "I'd like to fund college for them," I said. "All of them. Not just Melissa's kids. Ethan's too. And I want it in a way that doesn't let anyone redirect it." He nodded. "We can create education trusts with very clear terms. Money goes straight to schools, not to parents. That way, Melissa's mistakes don't become her children's punishment." So we did. Papers were signed. Accounts were created. The planner shook my hand and told me I'd done something good. Meanwhile, on Melissa's side of the fence, the news wasn't as rosy. The court-appointed auditor dug into the months she'd spent as executor and found a trail of reimbursements and temporary transfers from estate accounts into her own. Some she'd already moved back, anticipating scrutiny. Others were still sitting in shells of companies and personal accounts. Janet called me one evening. "She'll have to repay what she took, plus penalties," she said. "We're working out a schedule. If she doesn't comply, we'll pursue civil judgments." There was also that other possibility. The prosecutor's office requested the file. Rachel told me. The recordings, the documents, the court transcript. They're reviewing for potential charges. They may reach out to you. They did. A detective with a calm voice asked me to tell the story again, this time with a tape running and a legal pad on the table between us. When he finished, he asked how I felt about charges. "I don't want to throw my daughter to the wolves," I said. "But I also don't want this swept under the rug." She crossed lines. "If you decide to move forward, I won't lie for her. That's all I can say." In the end, they offered her a deal. No prison, but 2 years probation, mandatory ethics counseling, and a mark on her record that would make future high-level financial roles harder to come by. Her share of Linda's estate. What remained after she paid back what she'd borrowed, and after legal fees, was placed in a tightly controlled trust. She'd get an income, but she wouldn't be steering the ship anymore. Word got around. Her fancy friends, the ones who loved being near Linda's spotlight, weren't as eager to be seen with a woman known for trying to cheat her own father. Some stuck by her. Most didn't. As for us, we didn't speak for a long time. Birthdays passed. Holidays came and went. I'd see her name pop up in group texts when the grandkids sent photos, but Melissa herself stayed silent. Until one Christmas Eve, my phone buzzed with a message from a number I knew better than my own. "Hope you're enjoying Mom's money." That was it. No hello. No how are you. Just that. I sat there a long moment, thumb hovering over the screen. Then I typed back, "I'm honoring your mother by using what she left wisely and making sure your children are taken care of. The door is open if you ever want to talk honestly." I watched the little delivered check mark appear. No dots of her replying, just empty gray. A few weeks later, I drove out to the cemetery with a bunch of lilies and a thermos of coffee. Linda's stone was simple but elegant. Her name, the years, a line about her being a beloved mother and entrepreneur. It didn't say anything about laundromats or loan papers or late-at-night arguments over balance sheets. I brushed some leaves off the base and set the flowers down. I kept my promise. I told the air. They followed your wishes. It wasn't pretty, but they did. I stood there a while, hands in my pockets, breath clouding in the cold air. I wish it hadn't come to this with Melissa. I admitted. I wish we'd raised her to see people before dollar signs. That's on us too, I guess. All those years of putting success on a pedestal. We shouldn't be surprised she learned to worship it. A gust of wind rattled the bare branches nearby. It sounded almost like an answer. On the drive home, I thought a lot about parenting. How we pour in time, money, patience, hoping it all adds up to gratitude and decency on the other end. How there are no guarantees. You can give a child every opportunity and still watch them choose the shortcut through someone else's wallet. I also thought about my own part in it. All the times I'd let Melissa talk over me, make decisions for me, tell my story for me. I'd thought I was being a good father, supportive, non-confrontational. In reality, I'd been teaching her that my boundaries were soft, my rights negotiable. That if she pushed hard enough, I'd step aside. Money doesn't invent character. It just gives it a megaphone. Whatever was small and selfish in Melissa before grew loud when it sat next to 150 million. Whatever was patient and self-effacing in me grew dangerously close to self-erasure. These days I live differently. Not in some grand mansion way. I still shop the sales at the grocery store. Still wear shirts until the collars fray. But my name is on my accounts, and no one else's. I have a power of attorney drawn up with Ethan as my agent, and a living will that leaves no room for interpretation. Rachel has a file with every important document, and my instructions for what happens when it's my turn to go. When someone calls and starts talking fast about contracts or forms, I don't sign a thing until I've read it twice and, if it smells even a little off, pass it to someone who knows what they're doing. And if anyone, even family, tells me, "Don't worry about it, just trust me," that's exactly when I start worrying. Most of all, I don't let anyone speak to me like I'm just an old man who should be grateful for scraps. I've lived too long, worked too hard, and seen too much to let my own story be written over by someone else's greed. I never wanted Linda's money. What I wanted was my family's respect. In the end, she was the one who respected me, even after the divorce, by writing that will the way she did. My own daughter tried to erase me for a bigger slice of the pie. Greed doesn't just steal money, it steals relationships, dignity, and trust. And if we don't stand up for ourselves, even against our own blood, we help it along. So let me ask you something. If your own child tried to cut you out of an inheritance you were clearly meant to receive, would you take them to court? Or would you walk away for the sake of family peace? Where's the line between forgiveness and enabling? And have you ever felt a family member treated you differently because of money, or what they thought they might get someday? Maybe they were nicer when you had something they wanted, colder when you didn't. How did you handle it? If you're still listening to this, thank you for giving an old man's story your time. I'd like to hear yours too. Tell me in the comments what you would have done in my shoes, and if anything like this has ever happened in your family. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to hear more true stories like this one. And tell me where you're listening from. Take care of yourselves. Protect what you've worked for. And don't let anyone, no matter how close they are to you by blood, make you feel small just because they're already counting your inheritance.